Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
This is Bloomberg Businessweek. Insight from the reporters and editors who bring you America's most trusted business magazine. Plus, global business, finance, and tech news as it happens. Bloomberg Businessweek with Carroll, Massar and Tim Stenovec on Bloomberg Radio.
To Bloomberg Businessweek here on Bloomberg Radio. We are getting to some of the big conversations that we are having at the UN General Assembly and Climate Week this week as well. A lot of big corporate names keen to show off their commitment to sustainability, to development issues. But how effective are these initiatives? How committed are these companies to these projects as well? These are some of the things we want to get into with Tara Nathan, who's joining us, founder and executive vice president of the Mastercard Community Pass, a digital platform that aims to boost access to payments for remote communities. Tara, great to have you with us. Now, during last year's Climate Week, you spoke to us here on the programme about Mastercard's role in delivering services in Africa and in South Asia through the Community Pass programme. Can you talk us a bit through what's happened over the past year for you? What's changed? How have you evolved and moved on?
Sure. Thank you for having me. It's exciting to be here. What's evolved? I think with Community Pass, quite frankly, I think we talked about what it does, right? Community Pass is all about, it's a digital infrastructure that tries to digitize access for smallholder farmers, the poorest, most rural inhabitants living in remote villages in Africa and India. It gives them access to things like marketplaces, to buy quality inputs, to buy quality fertilizers, to be able to sell their produce for fair market rates and to earn their fair share. And over the past, since last year, I'd say we've scaled to 6 million users. And so that's really exciting. We're live in 6 markets around the globe. So I think we're not just building solutions now, we're really delivering them and delivering value and impact for, the people who use our solutions.
Tara, tell us about that impact. Like, what is it that you guys see on a daily, weekly, monthly basis as this program and this continues its build out?
Yeah. The impact is the really cool story, right? So I'll take you back a little bit. When you talk about a farmer, it's something that we living in New York City may not even understand. When you're talking about a smallholder farmer who earns maybe $2 to $5 a day, one of their key challenges is just getting they're a small business owner, right? That's really what they are. But their input is a seed. That seed might cost them $50, okay, to plant. And what we find is that a lot of these farmers can't access authentic seeds. So they're getting artificial fake seeds. So they plant them. 6 months later, they find out there's no crop, right? Imagine what that does to them. So in markets, we've actually connected them to authentic certified seed providers, and we've seen their yields go up by 30 to 50%. Now, add on top of that, we've connected them to a multiplicity of buyers, as opposed to what they may have previously had, which is, they would be stuck by a middleman or a trader who came to their farm gate, and they were price takers. Now, because we've connected them to a multiple of buyers, now that increased offtake commands a higher price of 20 to 30%. So those are the types of impacts that we're seeing on the ground.
Factor in the climate resilience element to this as well, because this is, handing that sort of power to growers, for example, helps at, when they are suffering from changing climate, changing temperatures, perhaps changing the crops that they're being able to grow as well. I mean, yeah. Factor in how those goals are feeding into what you're doing with those communities. Yeah.
I mean, it's all about productivity, right? I think one of the biggest drivers, obviously, of climate change is agriculture. So that's really what we're helping to make more efficacious. If you plant the right seed in the right environment, the offtake improves, and that sort of has a big driver on sort of climate. I think the other thing that I'm really interested in is the connection between the smallholder farmer and the carbon market. So we're starting to see a lot of really cool technologies come out where they can actually start to measure soil health. And how can we then drive that value as an incremental income source down to the smallholder farmer? And how can that now become an income generator for that poor farmer who's earning the $2 a day?
Tell me, I am curious too about what's the end game, long game from Mastercard in doing this. It certainly gives, we often talk about the lack of financial identity that so many individuals have in the emerging markets. But Mastercard getting involved, it obviously gets these people into the financial system, right? But I'm curious what the long game is for you guys to have this involvement in connecting these people.
Yeah. Look, Mastercard, we've had a long commitment to doing well by doing good. So that's in our fundamental DNA. We've made a commitment to connect 1 billion people to the formal digital economy. So I could tell you that in the first instance, this is absolutely part of that strategy to say, we want to be making the world a better place. But when you really look at our long-term strategy, these are markets of the future that we want to operate in. And this kind of digital technology makes us relevant to a majority of the population. If you look across the continent of Africa, right, north of 50% of the population is involved in agriculture. Somewhere between 30 to 40%, depending on the country, of their GDP comes from agriculture. When you look at population growth, right, the majority of population growth and of the new consumers in the next 30 years will happen in Africa and in these developing economies. So this just makes smart business sense for us as well.
Tara, you've been here, at Climate Week talking about how these issues are of its importance to companies as well. What's your reading on where other companies in your space, the broader industry, is on, working towards sustainable goals, sustainable development at a time when we've seen so much pushback on things around ESG?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the real pivot that I'm hearing more and more of, I want to hear even more about it, is commercial sustainability. So when I look to the Community Pass business, one of the big, we call ourselves, we are a social impact enterprise. So there's a dual mandate there. It's not just social impact, but it's an enterprise and commercial sustainability. And I think I've started to hear that narrative build a lot more, right? So it's, how do you encourage companies, and how do you encourage, frankly, the development sector to be more amenable to companies looking at this as a commercial enterprise? I mean, one of the things that we always talk about here is, who delivers the service when the grant runs out? It's all great and fine to be talking about these big donor commitments to things, but you need a private sector entity in there with a commercial model, who's delivering the service day after day. And I think, that's the shift that I'm starting to see and I want to see more of.
If there's one thing you could change to just improve and help what you are doing, what would it be?
I guess it would be that mindset, right? Well, a couple things. One would be that mindset of us all thinking commercially, number one, and number two, thinking in terms of collective action. So if I think about what we're doing, I mean, we recently, 5 months ago, we launched the MADE Alliance, the Mobilizing Access to the Digital Economy in Africa Alliance. And I think one of the really interesting and cool things about what that is it's about action. So it's not a coalition that comes up and puts up a bunch of logos and just declares a bunch of commitments. It's really committing to collective action. And what we've done is crowd in the actors, such as the African Development Bank, who has committed $300 million to finance this. We've got Equity Bank, who's going to be giving loans and bank accounts to the individuals. It's Community Pass and the Mastercard technology that's going to connect all these ecosystem partners. We're crowding in all these private sector actors to work in concert.
Yeah, that makes sense and kind of mirrors some of what we heard from the president of the African Development Bank a little bit earlier here on Bloomberg Businessweek. Tara, thank you so much. Great to check in with you again. Tara Nathan, Executive VP, founder of Mastercard's Community Pass, joining us right here from New York City.
This is Bloomberg Businessweek with Carroll Massar and Tim Stenovec on Bloomberg Radio.
We're going to get into someone who has written a book about it and kind of what we can learn from the past to maybe move forward. Yeah,
joining us in the studio is Michael E. Mann, Director of the Center for Science, Sustainability and the Media at the University of Pennsylvania. And your latest book, we're talking about Our Fragile Moment, How Lessons from Earth's Past Can Help Us Survive the Climate. Just published in paperback, we should say as well. You're here for Climate Week. I mean, as a scientist, when you engage in these conversations, what's your reading of where we are and how we're thinking about it?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for the commentary and for the question. One of the things that we learn from Earth history, when we look back billions of years, we've got nearly 4 billion years of climate history to look at. We ought to be able to learn something from it. And in the end, it really communicates sort of the dual message that is part of my messaging today of urgency and agency. We see examples in the past of climate fragility. When you push the climate system hard enough, bad things happen. You get abrupt changes. You get mass extinctions. On the other hand, you also see that there are moderating forces over time that have actually kept Earth's temperature within a remarkably tight bounds, bounds that are suitable for life for billions of years. So there's both fragility and resilience. And right now we're sort of at the edge of those competing factors. We are still within that range of resilience, but if we continue to push the climate system harder, if we don't bring the carbon emissions down...
The trajectory is pretty bad, right?
What's that?
The trajectory is pretty bad.
Yeah, and there are sort of self-reinforcing feedbacks. You get ice sheets that begin to collapse. That locks in meters of sea level rise. So if we continue on the path that we're on, we continue to burn fossil fuels at historic rates, we will exceed our adaptive capacity as a civilization.
We get that. We've talked about that a lot. So what's a lesson from the past that you think our audience should say, oh, wait, okay, so this happened, we did this. What can we learn from the past specifically?
Yeah, so I look, for example, at some past extinction events, like the Great Dying, it's called. This is an event
Doesn't sound like fun.
250 million years ago. The title of the chapter is "The Great Dying Wasn't So Great."
Yeah.
90% of all species on the planet died out in that extinction event, and it was a climate-driven extinction event. So it sounds really bad until you look at what played out. It is a worst-case scenario that probably doesn't apply to the current day. But if you tease out what caused it, there was an increase in carbon dioxide, and we know there was a warming of the planet, and it turns out that the relationship between the increase in carbon dioxide and the warming of the planet was consistent with the climate models that we use today to project the future. So we can use the past to say the models have it right. They appear to have it right. And again, that gives us a sense of agency, because the models tell us it's not too late to keep warming below what would be a catastrophic warming of 1.5 Celsius, 3 degree Fahrenheit warming. We can still do it, but that window of opportunity is shrinking.
But in the conversations you've had here this week, do you feel like that's understood well enough for that action to be taken? Because we see a lot of plans, a lot of targets, but the timelines are long.
That's exactly right. I mean, it's the glass half empty, glass half full.
And not always mandatory. So if they miss it, it's like, oops.
Well, that's right. And so, obviously, just a sort of voluntary action isn't enough. We're going to need binding requirements on businesses. We're going to need, ESG has to be more than just greenwash. There has to be real action behind it. Right now, we see fossil fuel companies, for example, talking a lot about carbon capture and sequestration, this idea that we can just manage the problem somehow without solving it at its source, which is our continued reliance on fossil fuels. And that sort of technology, it's not proven. It's unlikely we can deploy it on the time frame that would be necessary, but it provides an excuse for businesses to continue to pollute now. And so we have to recognize that there's that greenwash, and that what we really need is a rapid transition. We're making progress. We're going to see carbon emissions perhaps slightly decline in 2024. There's some preliminary numbers that say they're actually going to come down. So the green energy transition is happening, and it's making a difference. It's not happening fast enough yet.
How much, though, when you look at Earth's past and what has happened, how much of it, though, I mean, it's because of mankind and the mess that we've done, and that we still kind of can't seem to get it right? How much do you blame?
Well, there's some great examples. There was what we call the collision 65 million years ago of a giant asteroid, that killed off the dinosaurs.
Right.
And there's some lessons there. It turns out, what killed them off was actually a massive cooling from all of the particulate matter that was ejected up into the atmosphere. So it was actually climate change that killed off the dinosaurs. And the difference is, there is nothing, the dinosaurs didn't see it coming. They couldn't have done anything about it anyways. We don't have that excuse. This is a problem of our making, and we still have it within our capability to solve it.
When you look at the state of where policymakers are thinking about this, the pushback against green policies we've seen in some parts of the world, and you're thinking about an election here in November, I mean, how worried are you that derails what is a positive trajectory towards those emissions coming down?
Well, I won't mince words here. I've said on a number of occasions that a second Trump presidency would be the end of global climate action as we know it, because we know historically that the United States has to lead if we're going to see other countries come to the table. And we saw that during the Obama years. There was a bilateral agreement between the U.S. and China because the U.S. was doing its part. Other countries joined in. We got the Paris Agreement. So we know that when we engage on this issue, other countries come along. And at the same time, when we disengage, it sends the opposite message.
Although I would argue that I think we have so many conversations saying that when it comes to rules about the environment, we often look to what Europe's doing. It feels like that they have moved faster. So, I mean, do you really think that if the U.S. turns back, the rest of the world's going to turn back?
Yeah, I mean, we are the world's largest legacy polluter. So we've put more carbon pollution into the atmosphere.
So it doesn't matter. You're saying what everybody else does.
Well,
because of that.
Well, right now we're not the biggest polluter. Right now it's China, and India is rapidly rising up. So we're not the biggest polluter now. But what matters to the climate, it turns out, is the cumulative carbon pollution, and we've produced more of it. And so what that means is, if we don't send the message that we're serious, it makes it easy for countries like India to say, look, you had 200 years of access to cheap, dirty energy to grow your economy. Why shouldn't we get the same opportunity if you don't have your own house in order?
What specifically in policy terms makes you concerned about Donald Trump being re-elected? I suppose what are the steps that you would be concerned about?
In a word or in a phrase, Project 2025. So we know what his climate agenda is going to be. It's getting rid of NOAA, the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, the very administration that's responsible for monitoring hurricanes like the one that is about to make landfall tragically on the Florida coast. And so it's sort of an agenda to stop measuring the climate, to stop even allowing for language about climate change in government policy. That's, we can't solve a problem that we refuse to even recognize exists. And so it's a stark contrast. And some people would, say, well, Biden hasn't gone far enough, and we're not completely happy with the Harris sort of climate plan. But it's night and day. They will build on the progress we've already made, whereas a Trump administration already has an agenda in hand to turn back the clock and basically go backwards in terms of our climate.
Of course, Trump has distanced himself from Project 2025, but I don't
unconvincingly.
Right. Yeah, no, he has. And I don't know that we've gotten specifics about what a Harris White House would mean in terms of specific green initiatives going forward. Having said that, when you say things like NOAA, and I'm just thinking there are various global models of tracking weather around the world, and people can tap into them like that we never could before. Yeah. So there is that information out there. So the global gathering of information will not start. So I understand what you're saying, having said that, just something to think about. So
the question of data is very interesting there, isn't it? Because that's something that actually can really help us on this journey.
Yeah, and NOAA is responsible. That's where we get all of this detailed information, where we have scientists who study the behavior of hurricanes. We're improving our models.
But they're global models, right? So that there is still information that would be coming in.
Yeah, but we're making the measurements in this sector. We're making the in situ measurements in the Atlantic. We have the hurricane hunters who go out and look at these storms as they're developing. We would lose all that.
Can I ask you, this is something that we spoke to the CEO of the Global Wind Energy Council about, and he talked about misinformation and disinformation risks around wind turbines. How big a problem is that? This kind of relates to the data question.
Yeah, there's a lot of misinformation. Polluters have... you can't deny climate change is happening anymore because we can all see it playing out, right? And so that means that there's some bad actors who have sort of moved away from denial towards other tactics. And among those tactics is sort of delay. We don't need to, transition to renewable energy. We can do carbon capture and sequestration. We can rely. And by the way, there are all these problems with wind and solar, and these are manufactured problems. They're not real problems, but they sound credible, and they win over enough people that it makes it more difficult to advance the policies.
Is even maybe a bigger problem, and this came up in a discussion that we had with the head of Fortescue, the big mining company, but this idea of money lobbying by the fossil fuel industry, and that is still so entrenched. We still are going to need, everybody says fossil fuel for a long time. That's a big issue, and just got about, forgive us, about 35 seconds here.
Yeah, no, I mean, what we're talking about is not going cold turkey on fossil fuels. We need to continue to keep the lights turned on, right? There is credible studies that demonstrate that we can achieve the reductions we need. We can basically get halfway there, 50% reduction in carbon emissions by 2030 with existing technology by incentivizing that technology and de-incentivizing fossil fuel technology.
I hope that's 6 years away.
Yeah, but look, I mean, this is, I think I'm so glad that you're here with that optimistic message as well, because I think the fear is as we get overwhelmed by how difficult and insurmountable the problem seems. Michael E. Mann, thank you so much for joining us from the University of Pennsylvania. Your book, Our Fragile Moment, How Lessons from Earth's Past Can Help Us Survive the Climate.
This is Bloomberg Businessweek on this Thursday. Carol Massar along with Stephen Carroll, co-host of Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, in for Tim. How much time do you guys spend talking about COVID lately?
I mean, look, this is one of those things. Don't be scared, right? This is one of these things that it's we knew it was going to be part of the evolution of the disease. It's the waves of it, right? You notice it where people are missing from the office, and it happens, and you see it cycle through the office because somebody gets it and it goes around, or it's in someone's family and then they're out for a couple of days.
Yeah.
But
or you start seeing masks again in the office by a few people,
which I very much respect, because I think it's very respectful. But the idea that this is going to be something, and actually we're much better prepared than we were.
We know how to deal with this.
Having said that,
as we get ready for a new strain.
This is the next development on this story, of course, something that we have been told to expect as we move on from the pandemic stage. Joining us to discuss, Dr. Amesh Adalja, who is Senior Scholar and Infectious Disease Physician at the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security at Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, supported by Michael R. Bloomberg, the founder of Bloomberg LP and Bloomberg Philanthropies. Dr. Adalja joins us from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Great to have you on the program. Have I framed this correctly when we're talking about a new strain of COVID?
Yes, I think so. I think that we always knew that this virus was going to continue to evolve, and the goal was to really decouple cases from hospitalizations, from deaths, from hospitals in crisis. And I think we've successfully gotten there. And the thing is, we think of COVID, we've got more tools for COVID than we do for any other respiratory virus. People wish we had the tools that we do for COVID, for influenza, for example. So I do think that, yes, we're going to see new variants. There's always going to be one coming in perpetuity, but it's less scary because we've got so much immunity in the population and so many tools that science and medicine have developed.
So great that we've got tools. Having said that, is COVID in the same category now as, the regular flu that we deal with every fall? Do you put it in the same category?
It's still a little bit more severe for older people, for high-risk individuals than influenza. And it also doesn't have that kind of single season jump like you get in respiratory virus season with flu in fall and winter. We still get this kind of surge in the summer and then the winter surge. So it's a little bit different than flu. It still is likely killing more people than flu, but it is rapidly approaching the level of influenza. And I think we will get there if more high-risk people take advantage of new vaccines, take advantage of drugs like Paxlovid and Molnupiravir. So I think we're getting there, but it's still, if you look at it on a pound-for-pound basis, it's still a little bit higher than influenza.
What can you tell us about this new strain then? XEC, it's called.
So XEC is a variant that really came to light in Europe. It's a combination of two different versions of Omicron variants that have been circulating. So it's what we would call a recombinant variant. And it does seem to be increasing in many parts of Europe. There have been cases in the United States, but in the United States, it's less than probably 1% of infection, so it's not officially being tracked. But you have to remember, if it's not XEC, it's going to be another variant. There's always going to be one variant coming up, one variant coming down, one with their moment in the spotlight, one that's kind of fading off to the side. And that's always going to be the case. And it's the case with any other respiratory virus. It's just that the media are much more interested in COVID variants, even when they don't really change the equation. So yes, XCC might become a dominant variant, but does it change anything that people need to do? Probably not. Does it have an impact on the efficacy of the newly updated vaccine? Probably, yes. But is it going to change the equation or how people live with COVID? No.
Well, talk to us about vaccines. I did not get the latest. I mean, I'd gotten 4 or 5 shots, as we were supposed to during the pandemic. Having said that, I don't think I got the last one, and I kind of passed. I don't know. So what's your guidance on getting vaccines? Should we treat it like the flu vaccine? Get it if you're high risk? Get it just get it? Like, what's your advice here to people?
Well, I think if you're high risk, you definitely benefit from staying up to date with your vaccines.
Right.
And high risk means people that are overweight, people that are obese, people with diabetes, hypertension, immunocompromised, people who are pregnant. It's a large swath of the population that probably should be getting that vaccine. If you're a low risk person, 20 years old, no medical problems, you're probably not going to get very much of a benefit from the vaccine. You'll get some transient protection against infection, which will wear off. And I think, I've always been of the mindset that's in the UK, that's in Europe and even in Canada, where there's much more targeted vaccination to high-risk groups. I think that's much better than a universal recommendation, because what's happening is high-risk people aren't, they think everybody gets this, that they're not special, when they really are. The virus does treat them very special. They're at higher risk for severe disease. And I really think we need to get our high-risk populations vaccinated, because if we're vaccinating a bunch of healthy 30-year-olds, but not 70-year-olds, that's not going to really do anything to put a dent in, the tens of thousands of deaths that will occur from COVID-19 over this winter season.
Yeah, that's interesting to your point. I mean, my parents in Dublin get a call from their local doctor to say it's time. Yeah. If and it's happened every year, and it depends again on risk category. Another topic that we wanted to talk to you about, though, is the new flu vaccine. It's going to be different. This is an option that might actually perhaps encourage people that might be scared of needles to go for it.
Yes. So we've had this vaccine around since around 2003. It's called FluMist. It's a nasal flu vaccine. So it's needle free. It's basically a spray that's sprayed into your nostril. And it's now been approved by the FDA for self-administration, which is the first vaccine that we've seen be approved for self-administration. So this is a very innovative way to increase flu vaccine rates. Hopefully, people who are needle phobic, people who don't have the time to go and find a place to get a flu vaccination, will take advantage of this. So I think this is kind of a really important development, hopefully one that people will take advantage of, and hopefully which will lead to a precedent for more self-administered vaccines, self-administered tests, because I think that really gives people a lot of autonomy and will hopefully increase guidance recommendation adherence, and more people will get flu vaccinated, and this is just another way to do that.
Couple things. My understanding it's indicated for individuals from like maybe 2 to 49 years of age. Is that the case? Do you need a prescription, and is it covered by insurance?
So it is 2 to 49 because FluMist, that brand of flu vaccine, is only FDA approved for that group. It doesn't mean it doesn't work in other groups. It just means that the company didn't actually seek approval in people that were younger than 2 or people that were older than 49. So that's where the restrictions are. And what the company is going to do is have a website set up, kind of a third-party website, where you kind of do a questionnaire. And if you meet the qualifications, they will ship that vaccine to your home for you to give yourself or to give to your children. Insurance, I suspect, will cover it. It may vary from plan to plan,
right?
But I think they should cover it. There's no reason that they wouldn't, because it's a recommended vaccine and they cover other flu vaccines.
Great update, certainly on something that is still a part of our world. We're talking about COVID and just flu, certainly important. Dr. Amesh Adalja, Senior Scholar, Infectious Disease Physician at the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, of course supported by Michael R. Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Businessweek.